Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you so much for coming. We are so thrilled to have you here today, and what a beautiful sea of faces we have. My name's Holly Whalen, and I'm the manager of events for Arapahoe Libraries. We are excited to have you here today to hear from our wonderful panelists. And I want to give a special thanks for coming to a few selected folks in the audience. I know that there's family and friends here of the panelists, and I want to give a shout out to the following people. Jack Finlaw, President and Chief Executive Officer for the University of Colorado Foundation. Where are you, Mr. Finlaw? Thank you. Hey. We have Centennial City Council folks, Amy Tharp and Mike Sutherland, right here in the front row. And then, in case any other elected officials or members of the judiciary snuck in and we did not see you, could you stand up and we can honor you and recognize you? I know more people came for Judge Jackson. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I know we're anxious to get the show on the road, but before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping things. We're going to have a panel discussion for about an hour, and that will be followed by a Q&A session. For those of you that are not sitting in the front row, you should have on the back of the chair in front of you, you should see a QR code, and you can scan that to get into the Slido app to put your question in. If you don't scan the QR code, you can also just go to slido.com and put in the code. You can submit your question, and then we will take it from there. And the other thing that I wanted to share with you is there's so many of you here today, and I also know many people wanted to come today and were not able to make it. So if you know of somebody, or if you love what you saw so much and you just want to watch it again, we will be posting this recording on Arapahoe Library's YouTube channel very soon, and you'll be able to find information about that on our website. Okay. Before we get started, I do want to just give a quick introduction to our panelists. And you all have at your seats a brochure with a more robust biography of each of our panelists. But just to get things going, I'm honored to introduce the Honorable Gary Jackson, who helped spearhead this event. He is a retired senior judge with Denver County Court and co-founder of the Sam Carey Bar Association, supporting Black law students and judicial diversity. His mother, Nancelia Jackson, lived in Cherry Creek for 98 years. And next on the dais, we have Dr. Trudi Morrison, who has held top posts in all 3 U.S. government branches. She is involved in the Black Women Lead movement and has received tributes from U.S. presidents and senators, among her many honors. Her family settled in the Colorado Territory in 1874. Moving down the couch, they're very cozy on there. We have Cleo Parker Robinson. As I would think everybody knows, Cleo is the founder and artistic director of Cleo Parker Robinson Dance. She is a master teacher, choreographer, and cultural ambassador, and an icon of Colorado arts. Her honors include a Colorado Governor's Award and the 2023 National Medal of the Arts. Thank you for being here. And we have Mr. Warren Scott, who is a retired U.S. Post Office manager, Korean War vet, and life member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. Like all of our panelists, he has very deep roots in the Cherry Creek community. And finally, our moderator, Chandra Thomas Whitfield, who you will know as producer and co-host of Colorado Matters on Colorado Public Radio. She's received several awards for her reporting, including most recently the Colorado Association of Black Journalists 2024 Journalist of the Year. Please help me welcome all of our panelists. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. We got some beautiful weather today. Are we happy about that? Thanks, Holly. As she mentioned, I am your moderator today, Chandra Thomas Whitfield, again, co-host and producer of Colorado Matters on CPR News and KRCC. And you may listen to me on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the morning and evening, 90.1 FM, CPR.org, and on the Colorado Public Radio app. And I'm excited to share that we are recording this session today to re-air on CPR News at a later date. So we will send that message out to you. But enough about me. Let's get started. And again, we will be recording today. So, Cherry Creek. When the Denver community is mentioned nowadays, it likely invokes images of a bustling entertainment district, dotted with swanky homes, upscale shopping, and endless rows of high-end restaurants. But few people know about its history, specifically its roots in Black history. Yes, you heard that right. There is a rich Black history behind the North Cherry Creek community. And our panelists today are excited to enlighten us all about this unique chapter in Colorado history. Welcome to Legacy of Cherry Creek, Growing Up Black in Denver's Transforming Neighborhood, presented by Arapahoe Libraries. So we must start with the esteemed Judge Gary Jackson. This is in so many ways a dream realized and a tribute to your mother, who lived in this community for nearly 100 years. So what comes to mind when you think of the terms Cherry Creek and Black history?
Well, my mother would be thrilled. She passed away in August of last year. And my mother lived on the same block in North Cherry Creek. This was Garfield Street for 98 years. And she would be thrilled that this event is taking place in Black History Month. And the way my mother would look at this and look at this being a part of Black History Month is that we, as the Black residents of Cherry Creek, have been in Cherry Creek since the 1850s. And my mother would say, we were here first. And other than the Native Americans, that the Utes, the Arapahoes, the Cheyennes, there were Black people here in North Cherry Creek beginning in the 1850s.
Dr. Trudi, what comes to mind for you when you hear that term?
My aunt, Marion Morrison Robinson, was a piano teacher. She taught Cleo.
Yes, she did. She did.
And Auntie Marion moved out from a duplex that we had lived on one side, and she and her family lived on the other side, because she wanted more room, basically. And they, and I'm trying to think of how I can say this politely.
Just say it.
Okay, in fact, maybe I should just scratch that altogether. But they had several experiences in Cherry Creek that were noteworthy. And also, my aunt who lived in Cherry Creek, her father was George Morrison Sr., my grandfather. And I'm sure many of you have seen the park that is right across from Cole Junior High for a span of, I don't know how many blocks. but he was a well-known musician. And of course, Auntie Marion, who ended up teaching not only private students, but in the Denver public schools. Everyone was musically inclined, including, well, Vicky, my sister, couldn't play the violin. She tried. But she has a beautiful singing voice. And my grandfather, violinist, and Vicky and I would go with him around Christmas time for caroling. And, you know, we were so young, we didn't really know what was going on, but we did notice that every place we stopped, Big Daddy got something called Christmas cheer.
Big Daddy, right?
So on the ride home, Vicky and I were in the back seat, huddled, praying that we got there. And by Christmas morning, he was still kind of, shall we say, lit. And he would give the breakfast prayer. We fainted a couple times. Okay.
Oh, he was wonderful.
Yes.
Well, perfect segue, Miss Cleo.
I love it. You know, it's extraordinary. First of all, Gary, that you've invited us to come together, and I loved your sister, and I loved your mother, and she was really special. You know, I think she might have been my mother-in-law had things turned the way she thought they might.
Do I need to move on?
No, she's talking about my brother.
Oh, let's clear that up.
All right, let's get that right on.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But you know, I wasn't born in Cherry Creek. I was actually born in Five Points, and I talk about it all the time. And so having this moment where I can connect with Cherry Creek is really special because I invited my sister here to help me. So whenever I get it wrong, I don't get the facts right, so it's like, no, it didn't happen quite like that. So my sister is here, Leslie Sue Parker Wallace, and I'm thrilled that she's here because her experiences in Cherry Creek were very different because she's a little younger. And when I got to Cherry Creek, I had come from Dallas, so I had lived in Dallas prior, and so coming to Cherry Creek was very difficult for me because I had never, in Dallas, we didn't see any white people. So coming to Cherry Creek was very, very different for me. I had just come from being in an all-black Catholic school for 2 years. And we only had white nuns, so if you were white, I figured you were a nun. I'm like, okay, and then I learned Jewish. I went, Jewish, what's that? So when I got into Hill Junior High, it was very, very different for me. And I really didn't want to be there. I didn't see myself, and I had a very challenging time. And I was the oldest of four. So, but we had all kinds of challenges. We always had a police escort, which was very exciting. We were in a station wagon, I'm the oldest of four. We'd be in the station wagon, and Daddy would say, we'd say to Daddy, Padre, listen, there's Mr. Charlie. And he'd say, right on time, right on time. So we always had police following us as if we were there intruding into a community rather than live there. Yeah. So that was really hard. So Daddy would say, we'd say, Daddy, why is the police always following us? And he said, because we're as important as the President of the United States. Well, there you go. So we felt very, 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 he had to be right on time. So we had to deal with that. Oh, and Mama and Daddy are here. Okay, so Daddy became the first black actor, and he was a musician as well. So being born in the Five Points in Rossoni was wonderful. But my mother was a musician. He was out of Texarkana, Arkansas. And Mama was out of San Diego, and she was a French horn player, and he was he played all the other jazz. So we would have classical music in the morning and jazz at night. And so we're a little bit wild. We had a wild family. So anyway, it was a wonderful thing growing up.
So, Mr. Warren, what do you remember about the families in those early days in North Cherry Creek?
Well, my grandfather came, and that's William Pitts. He came to Cherry Creek in 1919. And the reason he came here was because my uncle I never met. He was sick at Fort Logan, at Fitzsimmons Hospital, and he died there from the war of World War I. My grandfather loved Denver so much that he wrote to his daughters back in Chicago, and he sent a letter to them and said, "You need to come and see Denver, because Denver is beautiful." And he said, "If you come, I will build you a house. I'll build a home for both of you." And so my mother and my Aunt Emma, they moved here in 1924. My grandfather built 3 homes in Cherry Creek. One was on Harrison and 2 on Garfield. One was 360 Garfield and 354 Garfield, and that's where I was born, in 354 Garfield. I was not born in a hospital, I was born at home. And so growing up in Cherry Creek, there were many black families from Colorado Boulevard to Circle Drive. Black families lived from Colorado Boulevard to Circle Drive. One family, the Coleman family, lived across about a block away from Six. Six was the CEO of Continental Airlines. And then all of the families that lived in the area, they didn't have, well, they did. They had children that were our age, but they didn't go to the same elementary school that I went to. I went to Steck, and when I went to Steck, the first 2 kids I met there was Julius Berger and Jim DeQ. And if you can remember that the DeQ brothers, candy and tobacco, and Berger brothers, barber and beauty supply. So those were my friends from Steck to East High School. And we were always together. We built caves and rode our bikes out to, we called it Sullivan Dam, Cherry Creek Dam. But we called it Sullivan Dam at that time. We'd ride our bicycles all the way out to Sullivan Dam and back. And then we joined the Young American League football team. We did not lose a game. 3 years that I played on the Bombers, and I played on the lightweights. And Julius and I played on the lightweights. Jim played on the heavyweights, and our plays were just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we ran the single wing. And my plays were number 1 and number 2 and number 7. Well, 1 and 2, I ran around the end, and 2, I ran inside the end. And 7, I would hand the ball off to Julius Berger on a reverse. And every time we ran number 7, he made a touchdown.
That was it.
because they all ran after me. And so, but that was my early life in
Cherry Creek.
Cherry Creek. I never saw any racism while I was a kid.
Wow.
And but because I was running with those two guys. I remember one time they said, let's go to Sportland Swim Club. And that was over on about 35th and Wilson Court. It was, and I went home and I told my mother, I said, I need my swimming trunks. I'm going to Sportland. She says, you can't go to Sportland. I said, yes, I can. I'm going with Julius Berger and Jim DeCute. And when I got over there, they never said a word. They took my money and I went on into the swimming pool.
Well, let's pause here and just kind of share some interesting facts here. So the area began as Harmon, a separate town, and was annexed in 1895. And the low area around Cherry Creek was the legacy of Black homesteaders like the ranching Parker brothers, who arrived in the late 1800s. And one reason the area remained segregated in its early era, may have to do with local conditions, because before the Cherry Creek Dam was completed in 1950, the area was prone to pretty severe flooding. And but William Pitts had the foresight to build on higher ground. And you can remember, and your mother remembered watching homes go under floodwaters.
Yeah, well, my mother, she was born in 1924, and there was a flood, I believe it was in 1937, and that was a flood of Cherry Creek. And my mother would remember seeing houses actually floating down Cherry Creek, going down to downtown Denver. And of course, the other issue was it was a city dump. So at the area right around First and Steel Street was the city dump. And that city dump remained there until about 1945, 1946. So the area, because of the flooding, because of the city dump, was area that to people of means, they did not want to live there. But it became an area that Black people, brown people, those marginalized people that had lower income could buy a lot for anywhere between $100 and $200 during that period of time. And so my great-grandfather bought 3 lots in the North Cherry Creek area, as was reported. One of the houses on Harrison Street is still there. It's a red brick house, 563 Harrison. If you look it up right now, the value of that house is $750,000.
Yeah, believe it.
Wow.
So, Dr. Trudi, what are your thoughts about, looking back at the history of how this community evolved over those years?
Well, this was not in Cherry Creek. It was in Denver proper. My grandparents and Big Daddy built his house, and the Klan burned it down 3 times, down to the foundation. And he tried to get building authorizations and all of the zoning things that are required when you get houses. But the problem there was everyone was in the Klan. For those of you who are older, you may remember that Stapleton Airport was named after Mayor Stapleton, who was head of the Klan. So these stories that you're hearing are laced with discrimination, as well as ethno and racial and misogynistic attitudes. This wasn't an easy way to grow up. As I look around the audience, I see so many familiar faces, and the time I've had to spend just with us, You know, we did an amazing job just to be here. Uh, yeah. And with Auntie Marion, the piano teacher, living in Cherry Creek, Vicki and I would go to Hummo's Delicatessen. We would, what was that place where we saw the Santa Claus that would talk back to us? He was an automated Santa
Denver
Claus.
Dry.
Denver Dry. Denver, yes,
very
that's where it was.
segregated.
Yes, Denver Dry Goods.
That was segregated.
And we had tea parties at Bowers. And Auntie Mary would make sure we were dressed to the nines when we went to these tea parties. I mean, shoes, just spick and span, everything. But we were the only Black kids there. You know, so our family gave us opportunities that many Black families and other families, indigenous families, just didn't have. So we recognize how fortunate we were, but we're still in the battle for equality in this country. And I've been there at the top level of government in all three branches, so I know from whence I speak. I don't even recall ever walking into a room where I was the only one and the only female. And there's still too much of that going on. What good does it do to break glass ceilings if the ones that are coming after you don't recognize that they could walk in the door?
So, Miss Cleo, this is North Cherry Creek has been described as a very close-knit community where neighbors looked out for each other, got your groceries delivered, all these homes. But what do you remember about the racial challenges during that time?
I don't remember any neighbors. We didn't have that kind of, I think because we came through Cherry Creek during the Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow laws. So having a Black father and a white mother was not what the neighbors invited you over. We didn't have friends. We didn't have that kind of community. We had each other. We had our family. And so I think Gary's family and the Morrison family, I could name families on one hand, but it wasn't like, I mean, I remember my cousin, I got to see Jesse Green, and he said, you know, when you had your 16th party, he said, I was coming to see you. I said, you were? I said, I actually married Tom Robinson, who is his cousin. I said, well, you were coming with Tom, right? He said, no, I decided to come on my own. He said, but we knew to get out of Cherry Creek before dark. So my experience was different than I think most. I had lived in Cherry Creek when I turned 12 we were on 3rd and Columbine. So we bought there because we couldn't buy in Park Hills. So we rented actually this huge house on the corner of Columbine and 3rd, and it's become many retail, kind of a wonderful antique rug store and all kinds of things. But when I lived there, it was this huge house that we were able to get. But when we went to buy, Daddy couldn't go. Mama had to go and purchase it. So we had to kind of hide Daddy. And we're like, and so, you know, he was so angry after a while. It was like, it doesn't matter where we live or not. So finally, you know, Mama would go in first. And then once we were there, then we could let people know that he was our father. So it was a very different experience for me going into Cherry Creek. I did not want to be in Cherry Creek. I didn't have this beautiful history that I could fall upon. So I had to create a space for myself and my brothers and sisters, really, as the oldest one. So I think what was really exciting for me finally, after being threatened every day to go to school, he will go. And I think I went to Hill, but, you know, I went to Bromwell. And so that was wonderful, but I was the only was the only person of color, other than Enrique Montoya, who much later becomes an extraordinary friend and director of the only Chicano company that we had. So here I had a black company, I had a Chicano company. He came to me and he said, Cleo, we went to elementary school. I said, I was so scared, I don't even think I saw you. I don't even remember you. So he showed me a picture, and there we are. I said, oh my God, Enrique, you went there too? What did you go through? So it was that kind of an experience. It was really, really powerful. Yeah.
Well, Mr. Warren, I see you over there nodding your head as Miss Cleo talks. What's on your mind about this aspect of living in Cherry Creek?
Well, one of the things that I had is I had a Rocky Mountain newspaper route.
Oh, that's right.
And I delivered. What happened was the manager came along and he was driving along, and we were on our bicycles, and he stopped and he says, would you kids think about delivering the newspaper? And I said, well, maybe that would be something nice to do. And so I said, okay, I'll take a paper route. And he told me, he says, well, I'll deliver the papers on your porch. And you have to take and fold them and deliver them. And I'll give you a route that is really a good route. And it was from 3rd Avenue to 6th Avenue, from Colorado Boulevard to Claremont.
Wow.
I delivered those papers from 13 years old to 17 years old. And what was so good about it was that's the hilltop area. That's where most of the famous people of Denver lived. And so, and I think when I first started delivering the paper, it was 75 cents a month. And
that's how much you get paid.
And daily it was 5 cents. You could buy it, and
Please.
before I quit, it went up to $1.25. And I received so many tips that I didn't really have to worry about a thing. You know, if it's 75 cents, they're going to give you $1. And the last house I delivered to was Cramner. Cramner, that's where we played football.
That's right, the park.
We called it Cramner's Park, but that's not really Cramner's Park. We named it Cramner's Park because he was the manager of the Denver Parks and Recreation. And he built that park so that he wouldn't have anyone in front of him, so he could look see the view of the park. And
that's interesting.
And I believe that park is really called Sundial Park because it has a sundial there. But we said, well, he built it, so we named it Cramner's. And that's where we played our football, the Bombers. We played football up there. And I can still remember Mickey Donahue. I think he worked down at Dave Cook. And Apple was our coach. We just had some good times. That paper route, I found a puppy on that paper route. I picked him up, put him on the bar of my bicycle, and his paws were hanging over the handlebar. And I kept him, and he when we went into Cramner's one time, he caught a pheasant, and so I took the pheasant, put it in my paper bag, and took it back home to my mother and told her to cook it. But you know what my mother said? it's not in season. I said,
You got to go back
and
at
I
the right
said,
time.
I tried to tell her, I said, look, the pheasant's dead. She said, well,
Funny.
I can't take it and cook it.
That
And
is
I
a
said, well,
hoot.
okay.
That's a hoot.
So we just had to throw it away.
Wow, I love it. I love it.
That,
Oh, I love it, right?
but
Oh,
that
fabulous.
that puppy got killed. Can you imagine? He got killed by a car, and very few cars out were driving up and down the street in those days. So I can't understand how he was chasing a squirrel, going across the street chasing a squirrel, and he died. But that was one of my favorite dogs.
Judge Jackson, your mother was there before Temple Buell built the first retail district there. How would you say that changed the face of the neighborhood, becoming more of this retail district?
You know, my mother always had the attitude of she believed in progress. And she never felt bad that the neighborhood changed from just being residential to basically in the early 50s, Sears and Roebuck was built, the Denver Dry Goods was built, and those were the suburban stores at that point in time. And my uncle will talk about the fact that there were black individuals in the neighborhood that were doing the excavation work, tearing down the buildings in order to build Sears and Denver Drive. There were black people that had landscaping companies. They provided the landscaping for the Denver Dry and Sears. So my mother never felt bad that there was progress, that there was a change. She always looked at that neighborhood as being a neighborhood that belonged to her, no matter how it looked. And you know, I can remember with my grandmother's house right next door, there was a house that had a chicken pen and a chicken coop. And there were vacant lots where, as my uncle talked about, building tunnels. And I can also remember how we were called Cowtown because there was a dairy that was just across Cherry Creek.
Right.
So my mother believed in that type of progress, and she believed in really civic responsibility because in their house, whenever there was an election, there would be the voting machine was brought into my grandmother's house. And so my grandmother and mother were basically election officials in Cherry Creek from 1926 until my mother retired when she was in her 70s.
Wow.
Was there any push out once it became more residential? I mean, more retail focused? I mean, was there any, in your view, an effort to kind of push out the black families?
Well, you know, at one point in time, there were probably 25 to 30 black families that lived in that area. I would say of those original 25 to 30 families, there are probably only 3 of the original black families that have maintained their property. Now, you can look at it when you say being pushed out. There can be, some of the reasons were death. I see the Kaysen family sitting real close to me, and their family was in Cherry Creek from the 1870s up until Marilyn Kaysen became the first black lawyer on 17th Street in 1969.
I remember.
But when her parents died, the house was sold.
Right.
There were some black families that, because of the real estate value going up, there was a problem paying taxes. And then there was the situation of people moving out to Aurora. So there were several different reasons rather than saying being pushed out. There were economic factors, there was death, and there was an eastward movement.
So more of a natural evolution of changing face of the community.
Well, and what I'm just saying is that, there's no question that during the Jim Crow era, there was the KKK presence, there was the white power presence, but after the 60s, personally with our family, we've been able to maintain our property up until present day. But that's really the result of my brother, my sister, who's right over here with her daughter, that we were able to get our degrees, get the type of employment where we could sustain what are the legacy of our great grandfather.
I'm curious, Ms. Cleo, how would you say this period shaped you into the artist that you became, the legend of Colorado?
Let me sit up straight here. I think it was extraordinary. I resisted going. I wanted to be a Smiley in East. Where's Buddy? Buddy knows back there out of East. It was cool to go to Smiley in East. So for me to go to Hill was like, why am I being punished, right? I want to be with you're a teenager and you want to be with folks you think you can relate to and all that. And I didn't have any friends. So I had to, I actually, when I came out of Dallas, I was mute, believe it or not. I had been hospitalized and almost died, and the racism and the segregation was so great that my whole life had become whatever it was at that time. And so it was a wonderful time in this sense that I had to trust my father. He said, what's more important is not your social life, but I think he realized that we were in a community of people who wanted to be successful. And he wanted me to be successful. And my mother and father, they were always about, you're the first one. Nobody ever went to college. You were going to. So there's a little bit of pressure. There's a little bit of pressure. So excelling was very important. So studying, reading, spending time in the library all the time. My brothers played with the Bombers, and I got to eventually play football myself. I played against the East High School girls, and we won. It was my first and last football game. I said, this is a crazy game. Who would want to come up again and knock somebody down? I had no idea. Of course, Tom became this amazing football player and so on, but I never understood the game because it felt like somebody's going to get hurt out here. Somebody is going to be hurt. So, but I became an athlete. I think that was the wonderful thing. So before I began to really understand what dance was for me, I began to run. I was a runner, and I went to the Junior Olympics. And I remember, and I threw the discus, and that was wild, as a teenager. But I remember filling out the form about whether I was Negro or Caucasian or other. And I put other, and my daddy took that thing. He said, what is other? What is other? He said, you are really Negro. I said, well, I'll be whatever it is so I can, whatever it's a child. I don't know anything about Caucasian and Negro and all that. I think kids don't understand race. And I think that was a moment where I was like, well, I do what I have to do. And then I went on. But I began to love music. But I think it was, of course, your aunt who really, she was an extraordinary pianist. Yes. And very strict, very, very, very strict. Mm-hmm. And my father knew the importance of everyone learning music because Paul Robeson was his role model. So you have to be the best athlete, you have to be the best scholar, you have to be the best musician, you have to be an activist. There was no room for anything other than that. And my mother was like, I don't know what he's saying, but I love it. I don't know what he's talking about, but I just love it. I said, Mama, what did he say? So we grew up like that. But I think having these teachers around us that would embrace us and take us to another level. I remember George Bailey, like I said this morning, he became this amazing pianist. And I learned that he was the pianist for the
Stuttgart Ballet.
Stuttgart in Berlin. And I heard about him all these years. He was playing for the ballet, and then finally I took my company to Berlin and was able to teach. And I was teaching in Berlin, and there I was living with George, and it was just wonderful because we could connect with what we did in Cherry Creek, and what powerful, what opportunities we had that we didn't know we had. And I think it was a wonderful thing to be able to be around the world and to be with others that had that kind of, vision. I think I was a little, just for this, I got ulcers. I was very, very driven, but it made me very sick. And I think that I look at other young children and I wonder how do they function when they're really trying to compete. And competition is very, very important. So I don't do any competition dance, no. The dance is about everyone dances and find out your voice. So I work almost against competition because you can't find out who you authentically are. I mean, I eventually did. I was very fortunate. But I had great teachers at Hill. And then I began to do musicals. I want to wash that man right out of my hair. I washed my hair on the thing, and the water would flash on the stage. And I began to love all of that, and find my voice in music and theater and so on. But I came from a musical family, and Philip Bailey kind of grew up in our basement. Playing music, and we were all young and experimenting. We didn't know what we were doing, but we had a good time. It was a wonderful thing.
Well, we're going to be going into our Q&A session soon, so I'd like some final comments, starting with you, Mr. Warren. The name of this panel is The Legacy of Cherry Creek. What would you say is the legacy as a person who grew up Black in North Cherry Creek? What would you like to see as the legacy of that experience?
Well, really, the Black families in Cherry Creek built Denver. If you go back and look at those landscape gardeners and they were mostly landscape gardeners, and what they did is during World War II, the developers came in and they needed to build all these homes out there. And when they built them, I have to go back and tell you about this. I have to tell you this story. I was in the 9th grade, Jewisburger, and I decided to take this elective class, cooking class. We're going to take cooking class with the girls. And so I was walking down the hall, and I saw this beautiful Black girl. That was in the 9th grade. I said, "Who is she?" And I told Berger, I said, "Who is that?" He says, "I don't know." I said, "Well, I sure would like to know her." But it ended up, I married her.
And then
What happened was I found out where she lived, and she lived on First and University Boulevard, and that was the Charles Wall family. And I would go down there so much after meeting her. I was always down there. Well, her dad was in landscaping business, and he said, "Look, you're down here too much. You may as well go to work." And so when I went to work for him, we did the finished grading on all of these homes, and then we also put in the lawn at Sears and Roebuck.
Wow.
And so you can, and the Andersons, they were in landscaping and they went into demolition, and they had a lot of contracts of all these buildings downtown where they had to tear them down, and build new buildings. With the Andersons had a big demolition there, and
So really,
So,
really
what I
created the face of North Cherry Creek by all these designs and being so involved in that.
all of them were responsible, and that's what the legacy of the black families in Cherry Creek.
That's beautiful.
Dr. Trudi, what are your thoughts on the legacy left?
You know, Cherry Creek for Vicky and me was a fun place, because whenever we were with Auntie Marion and Georgie, Georgie's our cousin. George and James Otis lived at 163 Monroe, and they were in the first graduating class of George Washington University, high school. Yeah. So whenever we were in Cherry Creek, it was fun time, because we got to go to the big mall, and we got to eat at a restaurant that had tablecloths. You know, it was an exciting time. And as we got older, well, we were teenagers, we got to ride the bus. It was 40 was the number of the bus. It just came to me. And it was so good that we could do that, because Cherry Creek's legacy for us was independence. You know, it let us feel that we were actually growing up. But more importantly, our parents trusted us. They knew that we would get on that bus and get off safely and walk from Collard Boulevard to First and Monroe. Sometimes we, stopped at Dolly Madison before we got out.
That's what I was going to say,
Yeah,
right?
we had to be armed. And I'll never forget the day I had a double dip. And we were crossing the street, running to get the bus. And my
ice cream.
So Vicky said, "Come on, we have to get the bus." I said, "I could miss the bus. I'm going back." But Auntie Marion wasn't too pleased with that.
You were late.
Yes.
But
So
you got
my memories of Cherry Creek were very good.
Judge Jackson?
You know, the word that comes to mind for me is really the survival of our Black heritage. And when I say that, my great-grandfather coming to Denver in 1919, making a determination that there were more opportunities for a Black man in Colorado than in Missouri, and knowing the value of property, and purchasing property in North Cherry Creek and also in Lincoln Hills, and then building homes. So to me, it's the survival of his vision. It's the survival of the heritage that he created for us. I look in the back and I see my 2 grandchildren, and I see my wife back there. The legacy that we've been there for 100 years, but to have property that Regina and I are able to leave to our grandchildren so that they can be in Cherry Creek for another 100 years. So I look at it as being survival and a survival of our heritage.
Awesome. Well, now we're going to take some of the questions here. So one question was there any synergy between the Black and Hispanic Latino Denver communities, especially during the 60s and 70s? Anyone who wants to jump in on that?
You mean Cherry Creek proper? Or just?
Yeah.
They just said yeah. I think that's what they're referring to, yeah.
Well, let me start with that, because when I went to high school, I was several years ahead of Cleo. And so when I was there at George Washington, in my class of 695 people, there were only 2 black students. There were no Asian Americans in my class. There was 1 Latino in my class. So in 1960, there really was no synergy because we were isolated in Cherry Creek. But, you know, I look at what my dad would tell me and my mom, and this is after World War II, and the soldiers coming back. There was a synergy between the Japanese Americans and the blacks in Denver because Japanese had been interned. Black people had been forced to be in segregated army units and military units. And there was actually a gathering in Lincoln Hills, a group of Japanese American and Black Americans meeting up in Winks Lodge in 1947, and that this was advertised in the Denver Star and the Denver Statesman. So the energy was what I would say sporadic. And you know, going into the middle 60s, there was the Chicano movement and there was the Black Power movement. There was synergy that developed during that period of time and lasted during those years. And we saw that on college campuses and in my law school. So that would be my answer to that question in terms of synergy.
Okay.
I want to ask if anybody remembers Gary's fro.
It's afro.
His afro.
Oh my gosh.
That's all I want to say.
There's a question.
All right. One question was, in addition to racism, was there colorism in this community?
From my perspective, colorism and shadeism were simply not factors in Cherry Creek, Denver, Aurora, because we didn't have enough black people to have differentiations based on shadeism or colorism. In fact, I didn't even know what those terms meant. So I went to law school back east. And it was just the opposite. I learned quickly. Because when we would go any place in Denver, if we saw another black person, hey, you know, where's the party? What's going on, you know? But by the time I got to Washington, D.C. and then New York, you don't do that because they won't speak to you. They're used to seeing each other. And I had what seemed at the time a strange reaction when I went to school in D.C. because I had never been around so many black people. You know, that's one thing we never talk about, how we feel, and that's one thing that people that are not minorities don't recognize what it's like when you're in a room and you're the only one that looks like you. They can't possibly understand what that kind of juxtaposition is, simply because they've always been the dominant group. And in Denver, it was still that way. So we didn't have a chance to even understand discrimination based on color or shades. And I was shocked when I saw that level of discrimination in black communities in Washington, D.C. It was so foreign. Skin color was prized. The lighter you were, the more Eurocentric. Your hair texture was, those were the ones that got more privileges than those that were darker or had, Vicki and I went swimming with Georgie, my cousin that was Stuttgart Ballet. We come out of the pool. This is with 2 swim caps on, okay? We got out of the pool. Talking about
Gary's here, right?
hair. Whoa. And so Georgie went around saying, does anyone have a rubber band or something? And this white lady came over and said, oh, I can help you. I have a pair of scissors right here in my purse. Now, aside from the racism, why was she carrying scissors? What's up?
Yeah, right. Wow. Wow. Yeah, no, I experienced colorism in Dallas. I mean, an all-black school. So I got beat up quite a bit.
And you feel that was because you were lighter?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And because I wanted to excel all the time. And if I got A's, I'd get an A+, I'd get an A++. You were always trying to excel, but the more I excelled, the more I got my booty kicked. You'd be like, yeah, she's trying to be all better than everybody. And so, that kind of, well, then maybe, I think some kids go through that where they try not to excel so that they can be popular. And it's a terrible thing what kids have to go through. But I didn't experience colorism. I think Trudy's right. We didn't have any colors to compare to. So we were just glad to find anybody of color. Like, woo, yes, amen. I mean, that's the way it was. I remember Tom Robinson would come all the way from Regis, take 3 buses to come and see me at Hill during lunch to give me a tuna fish sandwich with some cottage cheese and get back on the bus to go all the way back to Regis. And I'd be standing there in line going, he's coming to see me, and I didn't want anybody to think I had a boyfriend that young. Because I was in 7th grade, but she liked the 9th grade and all of that. But I had Larry Jackson was there with me, and so I think we bonded like immediately because we were the only. So so we didn't have that colorism, but I did create a Japanese and Black school, my first school before my company. So that was very important. But that happened a little after being at GW. But I think the best thing that happened in GW is that I really tried to understand religion. See, religion was very important to me because it was such major Catholicism and then major being Jewish. So I was both. I had a great time. I had lots of holidays. Lots of good food. A lot of good food.
Mr. Warren, do you want to jump in on that?
I didn't even know about colorism and I didn't think about it because my friends, they would, I could go anywhere because of them. But one thing that I didn't know is they would say, let's go to the movies. And I'd say, okay. Well, we went to the movies and we went to the balcony.
Oh, yeah. Exactly.
Well, I always went to the balcony when I was with my brothers and sisters. They never told me why they went to the balcony. So I never thought anything about it. And when my friends came and wanted to go to the movies, they wanted to go to the movies because they wanted to sit up in the balcony. And because of me, we'd go to the balcony. Because if they went to the movies by themselves, they always had to sit downstairs. They wouldn't let them go up to the balcony.
Oh, that's funny.
And so,
oh yeah, that's great. That's great.
I didn't even realize what was going on.
Isn't that deep?
Well, here's a question that I'm sure Judge Jackson would like to answer. How could the Cherry Creek neighborhood honor its Black history and heritage?
Okay. That's a great question. And prior to this event, the Cherry Creek Neighborhood Association had me do a preview with my sister, and we did a brief PowerPoint. And as a result of that PowerPoint, the idea sprung up at that particular meeting that because of my mother being called the Grand Dame of North Cherry Creek, that they wanted to do a plaque or a monument in the Cherry Creek area. You know, a perfect place would, of course, be somewhere in the mall. Well, the mall would be perfect if there was to be some type of tribute to my mother and basically the Pitt Scott Jackson legacy that could be created or built in the mall. So that would be one way.
Beautiful.
But I think that the other way is having events like this in which the word is being spread. The word is being spread as to the value of Cherry Creek more than just $1 million houses. That there are other greater values that were created and allowed the four of us to really succeed, to excel. And those values come from, in part, not only our family, but the people that we grew up with, the teachers that we had, and the experiences that we had, both good and bad. Utilizing those experiences to excel.
Well, we are about out of time now, so this has been an amazing and enlightening discussion. Legacy of Cherry Creek, Growing Up Black in Denver's Transforming Neighborhood, presented by Arapahoe Libraries. Let's give them a hand for coordinating this.
Oh, we're packing for ourselves. That wonderful.
And of course, let's also thank our esteemed panel here. Retired Denver County Court Judge Gary Jackson, retired U.S. Post Office Manager Warren Scott, retired lawyer, former Deputy Sergeant at Arms of the U.S. Senate, Dr. Trudi Morrison.
And I have a book out. Here it is.
All right.
It's called Winning the Battle Against Myself.
All right. And also Cleo Parker Robinson, the founder and artistic director of Denver-based Cleo Parker Robinson Dance.
Thank you.
And I'm Chandra Thomas Whitfield, co-host of Colorado Matters on CPR News and KRCC. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
I got my book here.
I know.
And
Simone.
on behalf of Arapahoe Libraries,
my
I
God,
would
I
also
know, I
like
heard
to
the
thank
cases
the
were
panel
here for us.
Chandra Thomas Whitfield, and also all of you. We could not do these events if it wasn't for you. We would love to see you come back to any of our events. If you have suggestions, if you have comments, there is a QR code on the way out. Oh, it's right behind me. See how wonderful my team is? And go ahead and scan that and tell us what you thought. And with that, we will bid you adieu. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.